You should be grateful we raised you. You'd be nothing without us." My mother's voice, clear and sharp as crystal, cut through the chatter of the crowded restaurant. Laughter followed like a well-rehearsed chorus, her laughter my father's quiet chuckle, and my brother Silas's loud, smug snort. I froze my hand, tightening around the stem of my glass. The chandelier light fractured across the table, scattering gold and white reflections across polished plates and untouched desserts. It should have been a birthday celebration, but it felt like a trial. I managed a small smile that didn't reach my eyes. "That's a strange toast," I said softly. "Oh, Mara, don't be so sensitive." Mom waved her manicured hand dismissively, her rings catching the light. "You always were dramatic." "We're just joking." "Yeah." Silas added, his grin wide and cruel. "Mom's just reminding you where you came from." I could feel the weight of the other diners' glances, the kind people give when they recognize humiliation dressed as family banter. My father, Harold, shifted in his seat, pretending to be absorbed in the wine list. He always did that disappear without leaving the table. Mom turned to him. "She never learned gratitude, did she, Harold?" He smiled weakly. "She means well, Viv." But Vivian Rourke didn't believe in meaning well. She believed in obedience. "You have such a good life now, Mara," she continued. "Your little design job, your nice apartment, all thanks to us raising you right." Her words were sugar-coated poison. She loved saying raised you like I was a rescue project, not a daughter. I was 29 years old, a licensed landscape designer, fully independent for nearly a decade. And yet one sentence from her could drag me right back to being that scared 5-year-old girl clutching a suitcase too big for her hands. The waiter arrived with the bill in a leather folder. I reached for my purse out of habit, but he didn't give it to me. He gave it to Mom. She took it, smiled, then slid it across the table toward me. "You're the professional now, sweetheart," she said, voice dripping with performative kindness. "It's time you learned to give back." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. "I'm sorry." "You make good money now," she continued. "You can handle it. Consider it your contribution to the family." My stomach turned to ice. Silas laughed under his breath. "You can afford it, sis. Come on, don't be cheap. It's your birthday." I opened the folder. $680. My chest tightened. They had ordered the most expensive dishes, lobster wine from France, steaks rare and bleeding. Silas had ordered 2 desserts and left one untouched. "Mom," I said carefully, "this is almost $4,000. She raised an eyebrow. And the single syllable carried 29 years of emotional leverage. My pulse hammered. I wanted to scream to throw the check back at her, but instead I pulled out my credit card. My fingers trembled as I handed it to the waiter. He gave me a sympathetic glance, the kind that burns worse than mockery. Mom clinked her glass. "See? That's my girl. Always doing the right thing." I forced myself to nod. My father muttered something about ordering coffee. Silas toasted his glass toward me. "Happy birthday, Mara. You're finally useful." The waiter returned with the receipt. I signed without reading. My throat was dry, my hand shaking slightly as I passed the pen back. Mom smiled content, basking in the illusion of control. "Same time next month," she said, half joking, half declaring. The words landed like a slap. The laughter returned, smaller now, but sharp enough to draw blood. When we finally left, the night air hit my face like cold water. I stood beside my car, the restaurant lights reflecting in the puddles on the pavement. Behind me, I could still hear Silas's laughter echoing across the parking lot. Inside the car, I sat for a long time without turning the key. My reflection stared back from the dark window. Tired eyes, perfect makeup, a woman pretending not to break. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Proud of you tonight. You handled that well." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I whispered to no one, "I'm done handling it." The words felt small but dangerous, like the first crack in glass before it shatters. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the last time I would ever call her Mom without meaning it like an apology. When I was 5, they told me I was lucky. Lucky to be chosen. Lucky to have a roof food and a family name that sounded respectable. I repeated those words so often that they started to feel like facts, not chains. The Rourkes were the kind of family that looked perfect from the outside, white clapboard house trimmed lawn Christmas cards with matching sweaters, but inside, every smile had a price. I learned early that love in that house wasn't free. Vivian Rourke loved being praised for her good heart. She'd tell anyone who'd listen that she'd adopted me out of compassion. We gave her a real life, she'd say at church, her hand resting on my shoulder like a trophy she'd won. She was a quiet thing when we got her. Hardly spoke. But we fixed that. I never corrected her. You don't correct the people who feed you. When Silas was born 3 years later, the house shifted. The nursery that used to be my room was repainted blue, the walls covered with clouds and airplanes. My bed moved into the storage room near the laundry. Mom said it was temporary. Temporary lasted 13 years. He's a baby, Mara, she'd say, smiling down at Silas. And you're such a big girl. You understand. I understood that love was a ladder, and I'd fallen off it the day he was born. From then on, every kindness came with a reminder. If I ate too slowly, we don't waste food in this house, Mara. If I cried, you should be grateful you even have a home. When I started school, I brought home perfect grades. Vivian glanced at the report card and said, "That's expected. You should be grateful we sent you to a good school." Gratitude became my second skin-tight, suffocating, invisible. By the time I turned 15, I was doing half the chores in the house. I cooked, cleaned, watched Silas when Mom wanted a break. She'd hand me $10 and call it generosity. When Silas turned 16, she bought him a car. When I turned 18, she gave me a used laptop and said, "Don't expect help with college. You've got to learn to stand on your own 2 feet." I did. I took extra shifts at a coffee shop, applied for scholarships, walked to campus when the bus broke down. I sent home postcards, every one ending with "Love you, Mom," even when I wasn't sure I did. During one Christmas visit, Vivian said in front of relatives, "We're so proud of Mara. She's always been independent, probably because she learned not to rely on us." Laughter again. Always laughter. That was her favorite weapon, ridicule wrapped in warmth. Harold Rourke sat beside her, silent as ever, nodding at whatever she said. I used to imagine he loved me quietly in his own weak way. Now I know he just preferred peace to truth. Silas grew into everything Mom adored, lazy, charming, reckless. He could fail a class and still get steak for dinner. I got scholarships and a comment about how I should send thank you notes to the donors. "Everything you have," Mom reminded me one night, "comes from someone's kindness. Never forget that." She said it after I'd won an internship at a major firm, something I'd earned by myself. But I smiled and said thank you because gratitude was survival. Years later, when I started my own landscape design business, I didn't invite them to the opening. I told myself it was to avoid drama, but deep down, I knew I couldn't stand to hear Vivian take credit. Still, every holiday I'd show up. Every dinner I'd pay my share. Every insult I'd swallow, until that night at the restaurant. Her words, "You should be grateful," had torn open every scar she'd ever stitched into me. Sitting there in the dark after the birthday dinner, I finally realized that gratitude had been her leash. And for the first time in 24 years, I wanted to learn what it felt like to live without it. By the time I hit my late 20s, I had stopped waiting for approval. It didn't come when I graduated with honors, and it didn't come when I landed my first real client. So I learned to build something that couldn't be mocked. My company, Ellison Landscapes, was just me, a laptop and a rusted pickup, but it was mine. Every morning before sunrise, I'd drive to job sites, sketch in the cold, and haul materials myself. My hands blistered, my savings dwindled, but my clients loved my work. They said I made ordinary spaces feel alive. That meant more than anything my family had ever said. When the contract for a new public garden came through, I emailed Mom just to share good news. Her reply was short. "That's nice, dear. Remember to save your money. No congratulations, no pride. Just another reminder that success was suspicious if it wasn't hers to control." I stopped sharing after that. Around that time, I met Alden Pierce, a quiet man in his 70s who owned several properties in the Pacific Northwest. He had the kind of presence that made people lower their voices when he entered a room, but with me, he was patient, curious. He'd hired me to design a therapeutic courtyard for a rehab center. When I showed him my plans, he studied them silently, then said, "You see life the way survivors do. You make broken things beautiful." I didn't know what to say. Compliments always felt like traps. I just try to make things work, I replied. That's exactly what beauty is, he said. From then on, he became more than a client. He became a quiet presence, someone who sent handwritten notes after projects, who noticed the details no one else cared about. One afternoon, he stopped by one of my sites with coffee. "Tell me something, Mara," he said. "Why do you work so hard?" I laughed. "Because no one else will." "No," he said softly. "You work hard because you were told love had to be earned." The words hit so hard I forgot to breathe. He saw through me the way sunlight cuts through fog, sudden, merciless, warm. He didn't press after that. He just let silence do the healing. Meanwhile, back home, things didn't change. Vivian still called occasionally to check in, which usually meant criticizing something. "I saw your website," she said once. "It's nice. A bit simple, though. Maybe you should let Silas help you with marketing. He's studying business." Silas, who had failed 2 semesters and changed majors 3 times, was her golden boy. When he crashed her car and blamed the brakes, she comforted him with homemade pie. When I couldn't make it home for Thanksgiving because of a deadline, she called me selfish. "You're forgetting where you came from, Mara." That line, "where you came from," haunted me more than anything. It wasn't just about being adopted. It was about belonging, about her constant reminder that I was on borrowed love. A few months later, I landed a contract to redesign a corporate rooftop garden downtown. It was my biggest project yet. When the firm published a feature about it, my phone rang within an hour. "Mom." I hesitated before answering. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "I guess all those nights I stayed up helping you study finally paid off." "Mom," I said, confused. "You never—" "Don't start," she snapped. "You should be thanking me, not correcting me." The call ended with her saying, "You always sound ungrateful, Mara. You should fix that." I stared at the phone for a long time. The old ache in my chest didn't come this time. Something colder took its place, a calm, heavy certainty that I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I was building a name, a business, a life, brick by brick, scar by scar. I didn't realize it yet, but each client, each design, each moment of peace without her approval was another step away from the woman who'd taught me that love had conditions. And soon I was about to learn that sometimes respect doesn't come from blood, it comes from the strangers who see you for who you truly are. The birthday dinner should have been the last straw, but part of me still believed maybe they'd see me differently now. Success has a way of making you forget old wounds, at least until someone rips them open again. A week after that humiliating night, Mom called to make things right. Her version of making things right meant another family dinner, this time at their house. "We'll keep it simple," she'd said. "Just family." I drove over after work, exhausted but hopeful. The house looked the same as it had when I was 16, white fence roses trimmed with surgical precision porch light glowing like an accusation. Inside, Silas was already there, lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Look who decided to show up," he said. "I was starting to think you'd gone corporate on us." "I've always worked," I said. "That's not new." "Yeah," he laughed, "but now you get paid for it." Mom appeared from the kitchen, perfect as ever in her pressed blouse and pearl earrings. "Mara, you're late," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Dinner's ready. I made your favorite roast chicken." It wasn't my favorite. It was hers. It always had been. As we sat down, Mom started her usual performance. "Your brother has some exciting news," she said proudly. "Silas has landed an internship with Braddock & Co." I glanced up. "That's great." "You did that on your own," Silas grinned. "Mom knows someone there." "But hey, connections matter, right?" He said it like a challenge, like my hard work was a punchline. "He's going to learn the ropes," Mom said. "Who knows, maybe he'll end up running something big someday." "That's good," I said carefully. "It's always nice to have opportunities." "You had opportunities too," Mom said, cutting into her chicken. "We made sure of that." I almost laughed. "You mean I made sure of that?" Her fork paused mid-air. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I worked for everything I have, Mom." "You didn't help with college." "You didn't help with my business. You just— Don't raise your voice," she interrupted sharply. "We've done more for you than you ever acknowledge. Like what I asked?" Giving me food, a place to sleep. Those were obligations, not gifts. The air turned heavy. Harold shifted, clearing his throat. "Let's not do this," he murmured. But Mom wasn't done. "You should be grateful, Mara. You had nothing before us, and you've made sure I never forgot it," I said. Silas laughed. "She's always so dramatic. We're just trying to celebrate, and you turn it into a therapy session. You think humiliating me is celebrating," I snapped. "At the restaurant, you all laughed while I paid your bill." "Oh, please," Mom said, rolling her eyes. "You make good money." It was one dinner. It was a reminder, I said quietly, that I'll never be part of this family unless I pay for the privilege. No one spoke for a moment. The clock ticked in the background, slow and cruel. Then Mom set down her knife. "You sound ungrateful," she said. "And frankly, I'm tired of it." "You're tired," I said. "Try being the daughter who has to earn her mother's approval receipt by receipt." Silas pushed back his chair. "You know what your problem is, Mara. You can't let go of the past. Mom took you in when no one else wanted you, and you repay her by acting like a victim." I stood up slowly. "You're right, Silas. I can't let go because you all keep handing me the past every time I try." Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down." "No," I said. "Not this time." My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "I'm done performing gratitude." She stared at me, eyes cold and assessing the way she looked at weeds in her perfect garden, something that didn't belong. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "You'll see how much you need us." "Maybe," I said, grabbing my purse, "but at least for once, I'll need me more." As I walked out, Harold called softly, "Mara, wait." I didn't. The front door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time I realized silence could be mercy. Outside, the sky was dark, the air sharp with autumn. My car keys felt heavy in my palm. I sat behind the wheel, breathing hard, trembling not from fear, but release. I wasn't crying this time. I was done begging for love I had already outgrown. The letter arrived 3 days after that dinner slipped through my mail slot in a heavy cream envelope embossed with a name I hadn't expected to see again, Pierce and Wynn Legal Associates. For a moment, I thought it was a contract update or some paperwork from one of Alden Pierce's old projects. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and I'd assumed he was traveling. My hands hesitated as I opened it. The letterhead was formal, the ink deep navy. "We regret to inform you that Mr. Alden Pierce passed away peacefully last Thursday." My breath caught. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I sank into a chair, the paper trembling between my fingers. Alden was gone. The man who had seen me not as a burden or a project, but as a capable human being, was just gone. Beneath the notice was a second page, one that felt strangely personal despite the typed words. "Per Mr. Pierce's final instructions, you are named as a primary beneficiary in his estate." I blinked, rereading the words, thinking there must be a mistake. The letter continued. "Mr. Pierce has left to you the property located at Lake Westmere, as well as the balance of his personal trust account valued at approximately $1.2 million to be transferred upon execution of the will. He wished you to have the means to build the peace you spent your life creating for others." The room went silent. For a long moment, all I could hear was the soft hum of the refrigerator and my own uneven breathing. Then I noticed the smaller envelope tucked inside, sealed in wax. It was addressed in Alden's careful handwriting. Mara. I opened it slowly. The letter smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. "Mara, if you're reading this, it means I've finally gone to rest. Don't mourn me long. I've had a full life and I'm not afraid of its end. What I regret is that you spent so much of yours proving your worth to people who never saw it. Use what I've left you to build a life that belongs to you, not them. You don't owe anyone gratitude for surviving. You owe yourself the chance to live." My vision blurred. I pressed the letter to my chest and let out a sound I didn't know I'd been holding. Not quite a sob, not quite relief, something in between. The next morning, I drove out to the lake house. The road curved through pine forests, opening up to still blue water and a wooden dock that caught the morning light like glass. The house itself was modest but beautiful hand-built cedar panels, large windows looking out toward the water. Everything smelled faintly of sawdust and salt air. Inside, there were no extravagant signs of wealth, just warmth, shelves of books on philosophy, gardening, and architecture, a framed photo of the two of us at one of my project sites, a note written in Alden's looping script pinned to the kitchen board. "It's yours now. Plant whatever you like." I sat on the floor, the letter still in my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt still. No judgment, no expectations, just quiet. My phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "We heard about Alden's passing. Such a loss. He was a good man. You must be devastated. Call me when you can." Then another. "Also, I assume he left you something significant. You should think carefully about how to use it. Family comes first." I stared at the screen. There it was again, ownership disguised as love. I set the phone face down and didn't reply. Over the next few days, I moved a few essentials into the lake house. Every corner of it breathed differently from the Rourke home, free, open, peaceful. I worked during the day redesigning a local park and spent evenings walking by the lake, letting silence fill spaces I didn't know were empty. I started sleeping better, laughing softly at small things again. It felt like waking up after years underwater. But peace never lasts long when it threatens control. A week later, my phone rang again. Vivian's voice came through syrupy but tight. "I heard Alden left you that house and some money. She said no condolences this time. It's only right you help your family now. You wouldn't have met him if not for us raising you." "That's not your money, Mom," I said quietly. "Everything you have comes from us," she snapped. "Don't forget that." I hung up without replying. For a long time after I sat staring out at the lake, the sunlight trembling on the water, I realized Alden hadn't just left me a house or money. He'd left me something rarer: permission. Permission to stop surviving like a debt collector of love. I folded his letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and whispered into the empty air, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." The first morning I woke up at the lake house, the silence was so complete it startled me. No clock ticking, no voice calling my name like a summons. Just the hum of the wind against the pine trees and the sound of birds picking at the dew. I stood on the porch, barefoot, coffee in hand, watching the mist rise off the lake. For the first time in 24 years, I wasn't waiting for someone to approve how I breathed. I built a routine. Work during the day, sketch by the water at night. The lake was patient company. It didn't demand apologies for being calm one moment and turbulent the next. Every project I took, from the house gardens, courtyards, rooftop restorations, felt like small pieces of repair. The world was finally quiet enough for my thoughts to be loud. On the third evening, I called the law office to confirm Alden's estate transfer. Clara Wynne, the associate handling it, had a voice that was all precision and warmth. "He spoke about you often," she said. "Said you were the daughter he wished he'd had." My throat closed. "He was the first person who treated me like one." "Then he knew what he was doing," Clara said. "If you need help with the property or taxes, I can walk you through everything." Her tone was efficient but kind, the kind of professionalism that didn't hide empathy. After the call, I stepped outside and watched the light fade over the trees. The water reflected the pink-orange sky like glass. I felt something like guilt mixed with awe. This peace wasn't supposed to belong to me. I'd been trained to survive, not to rest. My phone buzzed. "Mom, Vivian Rourke. Your father and I talked. We think it's fair that you contribute part of your inheritance to help with family expenses. Silas has tuition coming up." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later. "Don't ignore me, Mara. You wouldn't even know Mr. Pierce if we hadn't raised you." Then another. "You owe us that much." I put the phone face down on the counter. The word "owe" pulsed in my head. I walked out to the dock, the boards cool beneath my feet, and whispered the word aloud, "owe." It tasted bitter. A few hours later, another message appeared, this time from Silas. "Heard you got lucky. Maybe help your brother out. I need $15K for a new car. You can afford that now." My reply was one word: "No." Within minutes, the phone rang. "Mom." I let it ring. Then Dad. I didn't answer that either. When the silence returned, it felt earned. That night, I lit a fire in the small stone pit Alden had built by the water. The flames cracked and shifted, echoing something inside me. For so long, I had been the good daughter, the one who sent holiday cards, who paid for dinners, who smiled when humiliated. Gratitude had been my currency, and they'd drained me dry. Here, there were no witnesses, no scripts, just the sound of my own breath. I pulled out Alden's letter again, reading his last line under the glow of the firelight. You don't owe anyone gratitude for surviving. You owe yourself the chance to live. I whispered, I'm trying. The next morning, I walked through the property making plans. The soil near the west side was rich and dark. I decided to plant a garden roses, lavender, maybe birch trees along the fence line. I wanted to see life grow out of something that had once been empty. Days turned into weeks. My business picked up. Word spread that I'd been Alden Pierce's final collaborator, and clients reached out from cities I'd never been to. I stopped checking my phone for messages from Mom, until one night she called from a blocked number. Her voice was low-controlled. I'm coming up there next week, she said. Your father and Silas will come too. We need to talk. I closed my eyes. The peace I'd built suddenly felt fragile. About what I asked. About family, she said. And about what you owe us. She hung up before I could answer. I stood there staring at the phone's dark screen, heart steady but heavy. The lake outside was still and black, the reflection of the moon unbroken. I knew what was coming. They weren't driving up to talk. They were coming to collect. They arrived on a Sunday morning uninvited, unannounced, and loud enough to break the calm the lake had been teaching me. The crunch of tires on gravel snapped through the quiet as their silver SUV rolled up the drive. I stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, and watched my mother step out like she still owned the ground she walked on. Vivian Rourke wore her favorite pearls and a smile so tight it looked carved. Harold trailed behind her shoulders, rounded his face gray with something between guilt and exhaustion. Silas, of course, came last, sunglasses, phone in hand, smirking like the trip was a favor. You weren't answering your phone, Vivian said, as if that justified the invasion. So we decided to come to you. You should have called first, I replied evenly. We're family, she said, brushing past me toward the porch steps. We don't need appointments. I didn't move. That's exactly what you need. Her smile twitched. Don't start, Mara. We just came to talk. Then talk from there, I said, nodding to the gravel. She glanced around, eyes scanning the porch, the house, the stillness. Nice place, she said finally. A little small for someone with 7 figures in the bank, but nice. There it was, the reason for the visit wrapped in fake civility. Silas leaned against the SUV, grinning. You know Mom's right. You could do a lot of good with that money. Family first. Right, I crossed my arms. You mean I could fix your car? That'd be a start, he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. This isn't funny, I said. Why are you here? Vivian's tone hardened. Because, Mara, we've been talking and we've decided something. We spent 18 years raising you, housing you, feeding you, sending you to school? Community college, I interrupted. Which I paid for. She ignored that. And it's only fair that now you give something back. You wouldn't be where you are without us. I stared at her. You want money. We want recognition, she corrected, voice clipped, almost proud of the manipulation. We think $250,000 is reasonable, a repayment for the years of sacrifice. I felt something inside me go still. You want me to pay you for parenting? Don't twist it, she snapped. This is about balance, gratitude. I laughed softly, the sound sharp and foreign in the open air. You've had gratitude your entire life, Mom. You've worn it like jewelry. But you want cash now, too. Watch your tone, she hissed. I could have left you in that foster home. I could have let you rot there. And you remind me every time you open your mouth, I said. Silas stepped forward, voice rising. You're being cruel. Mom's done everything for you, everything I said. She made sure I never forgot I was lucky to be allowed in her house. She made me your babysitter, your maid, your personal scapegoat. You got love, I got lessons. Enough, Vivian's voice cracked through the air. Don't rewrite history. We gave you a life. No, I said quietly. You gave me a leash. Harold tried to speak, then his voice trembling. Maybe we should go. No, she cut him off, eyes blazing. Not until she understands. Mara, if you refuse, we'll take this to court. We'll have a judge decide what's fair. I blinked, stunned for a second at how easily she weaponized motherhood. Then something cold and clear replaced the shock. I set my coffee cup down on the porch railing. Then I'll see you there. The words landed like a line drawn in sand. Vivian went pale, her mouth tightening, but she recovered quickly. You'll regret this. I already do, I said. Silas glared at me. You've changed. No, I replied. I've just stopped apologizing. They turned back toward the SUV, silence thick with fury. Gravel scattered under their tires as they drove off, the sound fading into the trees. When they were gone, I stood on the porch for a long time, heart-hammering hands, trembling not from fear, but from something dangerously close to freedom. The calm of the lake returned slowly, wave by wave, as if it approved. Inside, I found Alden's letter again and read the last line. You owe yourself the chance to live. I whispered into the empty house. I think I'm finally earning it. It took less than 2 weeks for them to follow through on their threat. A thick envelope arrived by certified mail stamped from Multnomah County Family Court. The petition's title almost made me laugh. Claim for reimbursement of parental expenditures. In simpler words, my mother was suing me for being raised. Inside were pages of calculations, childcare clothing, private emotional support, even emergency food costs. At the bottom, the sum was exactly what she'd said. $250,000. Signed, Vivian Rourke. Filed by Silas Rourke as supporting witness. For a moment, I just stood in my kitchen, the paper trembling between my fingers. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or cry or burn it, but instead I laughed, a quiet, hollow sound that startled even me. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the old Pearson Wynn card. Clara Wynn answered on the second ring. This is Clara. It's Mara Ellison. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Alden's former client. Of course. How can I help? I've just been served, I said, by my own mother. There was a pause, then a measured breath on the other end. Come in tomorrow morning. Bring everything. When I arrived, Clara greeted me with a calm professionalism that steadied me instantly. She was around 35, sharp-eyed but kind, the kind of person who looked like she'd seen too many unfair things to be easily shocked. She read the papers in silence, her expression neutral until she reached the section labeled Evidence of Moral Obligation. She attached your adoption decree, Clara said, and she's claiming that your inheritance was a shared family opportunity. I swallowed hard. Can she do that? Clara set the papers down. She can file it, but she can't win it not on those grounds. Still, it'll get messy. I can handle messy, I said. I believe you can, she said, studying me. But I also believe you've handled enough of it alone. Let me help. We spent the next 2 hours going through my records. Clara was meticulous, asking for every email, every receipt, every document that could show financial independence. When I mentioned the adoption stipends my parents used to receive, she paused mid-note. Stipends. Yeah, I said. They got monthly checks from the state. I remember Mom talking about it like it was nothing. Did she ever show you where that money went? I shook my head. She said it went to groceries. But Silas got a car when he was 16. A new one. Clara's brow furrowed. Do you remember the year 2011? Blue Honda Civic. She typed quickly. There was a state case that year about fraudulent adoption reimbursements. Some families were caught misusing funds. She looked up. If your mother filed false claims and spent the stipend on personal items, that's financial misconduct. And if she's now suing you for reimbursement on top of that, it's fraud, I finished for her. Exactly. For the first time in days, I felt something other than dread. Clara leaned back, her voice, soft but certain. She didn't raise you out of love, Mara. She raised you like an investment. And now she's trying to collect interest. I nodded, feeling tears sting my eyes. Then let's end it. Over the next week, Clara built the case. She tracked down public records bank statements and archived adoption grant filings. Each piece revealed the same truth. Vivian had inflated her reimbursement forms for years, reporting expenses for private tutoring therapy, even special dietary needs that never existed. The total misuse crossed $80,000. When Clara handed me the summary report, she said, She's not just unethical, she's criminal. I read through the pages, each word like a match catching fire. What happens next? We file a countersuit, Clara said. We'll present evidence of fraud, request dismissal, and petition for legal costs. She'll never see a dime of your inheritance. Good, I said, because she's already taken enough. Clara smiled faintly. I've represented foster youth before Mara, but you're the first one who reminds me that surviving doesn't mean owing. I looked at the lake through her office window, the reflection of light on glass blurring slightly. For years, I had believed my silence kept the peace. Now I understood it had only kept the abuse quiet. Let's make it official, I said. I'm ready to speak. You already are, Clara said. This time the law will do the shouting for you. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper coffee and cold nerves. I sat at the defendant's table beside Clara Wynne, hands clasped in my lap. Across the aisle, Vivian Rourke adjusted her pearl earrings as though preparing for a photo shoot, not a legal proceeding. Silas sat behind her arms, crossed, wearing the same entitled smirk he'd had since childhood. Harold wasn't there. That didn't surprise me. He never showed up for conflict, only the aftermath. The clerk called the case Rourke versus Ellison. The words felt surreal. My mother's name versus mine, as if the state itself were acknowledging what I'd known all along. We were not family, just opposing forces bound by paperwork. Vivian's attorney began, a slick man in an expensive suit who spoke with polished outrage. Your Honor, my client made enormous sacrifices raising Ms. Ellison. She provided her with a home, food, emotional care, and opportunity. In return, Ms. Ellison has inherited substantial wealth and now refuses to support the woman who made her success possible. This case is about fairness. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a steady gaze, lifted a brow. Ms. Rourke, you're claiming financial reimbursement for parenting. For years of unpaid labor, Vivian said sweetly. I gave her everything. Including state stipends, Clara murmured beside me. The judge looked unimpressed but nodded for Clara to proceed. Clara stood with quiet authority, the kind of confidence that made people listen before she spoke. Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss the claim on grounds of fraud and lack of legal merit. My client is under no obligation to financially compensate her adoptive parents, particularly when those parents received state funding for her care. Vivian's lawyer straightened. We dispute that accusation. Do you? Clara opened a folder, sliding a series of papers forward. Because the Oregon Department of Child Welfare does not. These are copies of financial audits showing Mrs. Rourke received over $85,000 in adoption stipends between 2000 and 2018. Here are corresponding bank statements showing the funds were diverted for the purchase of a personal vehicle, a 2011 Honda Civic for Mr. Silas Rourke. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vivian's smile faltered just slightly. Clara continued, her tone cool, deliberate. Additionally, Mrs. Rourke reported false expenses, private tutoring, therapy, dietary supplements, none of which occurred. We've corroborated this with school and medical records. That, Your Honor, constitutes state-level fraud. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Rourke, do you have an explanation? Vivian's cheeks flushed. That's family money. We used it for all of us. Clara didn't miss a beat. Then why was Mara's college fund empty while your son drove a new car? Silence. Vivian's lawyer cleared his throat, but she snapped before he could stop her. Because she didn't need it. She was given opportunities. She should be thanking us, not humiliating us in court. Clara's voice was calm. She did thank you, Mrs. Rourke. For 24 years. Vivian turned to me, then her eyes sharp as broken glass. You ungrateful little girl. We saved you. You were nothing before us. My heart pounded, but I stood. My voice came out steady. I know, and you never let me forget it. You took a child who just wanted a home and turned gratitude into a lifetime debt. You didn't raise me, you managed me, but I'm done paying for the privilege of existing. The judge's gavel tapped once, soft but final. Enough. I've heard enough. She shuffled through her notes, then spoke clearly. This court finds no legal or ethical grounds for the plaintiff's claim. In fact, the evidence suggests misuse of state adoption funds. The matter of reimbursement is denied, and the Department of Child Welfare will be notified for review. Vivian went pale. Silas muttered something under his breath, and Clara whispered, "That's justice." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Ellison, you are free of this claim. You owe nothing." The words hit deeper than I expected. For the first time in my life, "owe nothing" didn't sound empty, it sounded like freedom. Vivian pushed back her chair abruptly. "You'll regret this," she hissed, eyes wild. "Maybe," I said, quietly, "but at least it'll be mine." As the gavel struck final, Clara touched my arm. "You did good," she said. "No," I whispered, watching Vivian storm out of the courtroom. "I just stopped being afraid." The story hit the local papers 3 days later. Mother sues daughter for gratitude loses in court. I hadn't expected it to spread, but someone in the courthouse must have leaked the transcript. The article went viral for a weekend, and my inbox filled with messages from strangers, some pitying, some furious on my behalf, others telling me they'd been raised by parents just like mine. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready to be a symbol of survival. I just wanted to breathe without looking over my shoulder. Vivian Rourke didn't disappear quietly. She gave interviews to anyone who would listen, painting herself as a heartbroken mother betrayed by greed. On local talk radio, she said I raised her from nothing, and this is how she repays me, dragging her own family through the mud. She sounded poised, tragic, believable. That was always her gift. But the truth has its own gravity, and slowly people around her started to learn more. Clara forwarded me a brief notice from the Department of Child Welfare. They were officially opening an investigation into misuse of adoption funds tied to my case. Vivian was required to repay the state and faced 12 months of probation. Her name, once whispered with admiration in our old neighborhood, became something people avoided saying out loud. Silas, the ever-loyal son, tried to defend her online, but it only made things worse. Someone unearthed old photos of the blue Honda Civic she'd bought with state funds, posting them with captions like, "Guess gratitude comes with 4 wheels." Within weeks, he deactivated his accounts. Dad Harold Rourke showed up at my lake house one afternoon without warning. When I opened the door, he looked smaller, as if the years had finally caught up to him. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said quietly. "She said it was just talk. I didn't think she'd actually file." I crossed my arms. "You never think, Dad. You just stand by." He nodded, shame softening his face. "You're right." His voice cracked. "I should have stood up for you years ago." I hesitated, then stepped aside. "You still can." We sat on the porch in silence, watching the water ripple. He didn't say much after that, just held a folded piece of paper, Vivian's apology letter. It wasn't written to me. It was to him. "She's turned you against me." He hadn't replied. He said he was staying with a friend for now, thinking about divorce. I didn't tell him what to do. I'd spent too long mothering the people who were supposed to protect me. When he left, I realized I didn't hate him. I just didn't need his permission to heal anymore. The following week, Clara called. "The state's closed the investigation. Your mother's been ordered to pay back the funds over the next 5 years. Probation and community service." "Community service?" I asked. She requested to work with foster programs. Clara said, her voice dry. "They declined." I almost laughed. Good. The months that followed felt strange. Quiet, unsteady, almost like peace, but with bruises still under the surface. My business grew faster than I could manage. Clients wanted the designer who stood up to her family. I didn't market it, but word traveled anyway. People called me brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for surviving. One evening, I drove into town to pick up supplies. The cashier at the hardware store, a woman in her 60s, looked at me carefully and said, "You're that girl from the paper, aren't you? The one whose mom sued her?" I froze. She smiled gently. "You did the right thing, honey. Sometimes the only way to love yourself is to stop letting them decide what love means." I thanked her quietly and drove back through the dark, her words echoing all the way home. The Rourke house sold that same month. The official story was downsizing. Unofficially, Vivian needed the money for restitution. Silas moved to Seattle for work, at least that's what I heard. He didn't say goodbye. I didn't need him to. The night after I found out, I sat on my dock with a cup of tea, watching the moonlight scatter across the water. For the first time, I felt no weight on my chest, no phantom guilt tugging at me to call, to explain, to apologize. The peace was real this time, not borrowed, not owed, just mine. Spring came early that year. The trees around the lake thawed into green again, and every morning sunlight scattered across the water like spilled glass. The quiet that once felt heavy had become something else, an invitation. I started taking morning walks with my sketch pad drawing layouts for a new project I'd been thinking about, a community garden for youth aging out of foster care. It wasn't about charity. It was about giving back what I'd once needed, a place that didn't ask you to prove your worth before you could belong. When I told Clara Wynne, she smiled. "A garden for survivors," she said. "That sounds like something Alden would have loved." He would have, I agreed. He believed broken things could still grow. Clara offered to help with the legal work pro bono. She said it was the least she could do for a friend. It struck me how natural that word sounded, friend. She wasn't someone I had to earn. She just stayed. We started small, a plot of donated land behind a community center, a few volunteers, and a local grant. The first day we broke ground, I looked around at the people holding shovels beside me, teachers, retirees, a couple of kids from the local shelter, and realized none of them cared where I came from. They just wanted to plant something that mattered. By summer, the garden was blooming with lavender sage and rows of tomato vines that reached toward the sun like they'd never known restraint. The laughter that filled that space sounded nothing like the kind I'd grown up with. It wasn't cruel or mocking. It was the sound of people breathing freely. One afternoon, as we were cleaning up, a familiar voice called from the edge of the field. "Mara." I turned, startled. Silas stood there, thinner than I remembered, the sharp arrogance worn down into something quieter. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes tired. "Silas," I said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "I heard you started this place. I wanted to see it." I didn't answer right away. He looked around the garden, his voice soft. "It's nice. Peaceful." He swallowed hard. "Mom's not doing great. The investigation messed her up. She's been different, angry but also lost." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him it wasn't my problem. Another part knew I wouldn't mean it. He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time there wasn't any judgment in his eyes, just exhaustion. "I didn't know how bad it was until she turned on me too," he said. "After the court stuff, she blamed me. Said I should have defended her better. I just wanted to make her proud." I felt something twist in my chest, not forgiveness, but recognition. The pattern had finally turned on him. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. "I just wanted to say I get it now." We stood there in silence, the wind brushing between us like a referee. "Do you need help?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, I just needed to tell you I'm sorry." It wasn't enough to erase everything, but it was the first true thing he'd ever said to me. "Then start over," I said. "Learn to live without her voice in your head. It's harder than it sounds, but it's worth it." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. "You really think so?" "I know so," I said, "because that's what I did." He managed a small smile before turning to leave. I didn't stop him. Some journeys have to begin alone. That evening, I sat in the garden long after everyone left, the scent of lavender thick in the air. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone rebuilding from wreckage. I felt like someone planting roots, not the kind that chained you to pain, but the kind that held you steady when the world tried to pull you apart. I realized then that family wasn't a bloodline. It was a circle you built yourself, one honest person at a time. And against every odd, I had finally built mine. Autumn came back around like a slow forgiveness. The air grew sharp. The garden turned amber and gold, and I could finally feel the rhythm of a life that didn't orbit pain. I'd moved into a small 2-bedroom house near the water, modest, bright, full of windows that let the morning in. Sometimes, when I brewed coffee before sunrise, I'd catch my reflection in the glass and almost not recognize her, the woman who wasn't bracing for another blow. One chilly Sunday morning, I got a letter in the mail, an actual envelope, not an email. The handwriting was unmistakable, Vivian Rourke. For a long minute, I just stared at it on the counter, unsure if I should even open it. Then I did. It wasn't an apology. Not really. Vivian never knew how to write those. But it was something else. "I saw the article about your garden," she wrote. "I don't understand what you're trying to prove, but if it helps you sleep at night, fine. I've been sentenced to community service library work of all things. People whisper when I walk in. Your father doesn't speak to me anymore. You've ruined what was left of this family. but I hope you're happy." There was no signature, just that last line. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a folder labeled Proof. Proof that even after everything she still couldn't say the words that might have freed her. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt distance. The kind that comes when you finally walk far enough from a fire that it can't burn you anymore. That same week, our garden received a local award, Community Renewal Initiative of the Year. The mayor handed me a plaque under a canopy of fairy lights and late October stars. "You turned pain into something that feeds people," she said. "That's rare." After the ceremony, an older woman approached me, gray hair, soft eyes, a floral scarf. She hesitated before speaking. "I read about you last year," she said. "My daughter aged out of foster care. She's 20 now. I think she'd like what you've built here." I smiled. "Bring her any time. There's always room for one more." The woman nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "You're doing something beautiful, dear. Something redemptive." That word redemptive stayed with me long after the crowd left. Later that night, I sat on the dock outside my house, the award beside me, the lake silent except for the whisper of wind through the reeds. I thought about Alden, the mentor who once told me healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about rewriting your part in it. I had. Vivian would probably never change. Silas might struggle for years to unlearn what she taught him. Harold would keep drifting between regret and resignation. But their stories weren't mine to carry anymore. Mine was simpler now. Wake up, work hard, build things that last, plant something that grows. Love the few who show up and mean it. A few days later, Clara Wynne stopped by the garden. She looked around at the rows of pumpkins at the kids laughing as they chased each other with wheelbarrows, and she said, "You ever think about expanding? Maybe a second garden in Portland." I grinned. "You offering to be my lawyer again?" "I'd be honored," she said, smiling. "Besides, you're terrible at reading contracts." We laughed until tears came, the kind of laughter that didn't echo in old wounds but bloomed in new beginnings. That night, I lit a candle in the garden's center, something I did every season to remember how it started. The flame flickered low, soft against the cool air. I whispered, "For everyone who never got a chance to bloom." And maybe somewhere in the dark, Alden heard me. Maybe Vivian did too. Maybe forgiveness isn't a grand speech or courtroom victory. Maybe it's this, a quiet peace earned by surviving what was meant to destroy you. I went back inside, locking the door behind me. The house was still safe, mine. On the kitchen counter, the old letter from Vivian sat under the award plaque like two bookends to the same story. For years, I'd thought justice would look like her punishment. But standing there in the soft light of my own home, I finally understood justice was simply never becoming her.